Last week, we made a video breaking down the differences in the story of Salem as presented by Jinn in Volume 6 of the show, and the fairy tale version that was included in the book, The Fairy Tales of Remnant, which as the name suggests is meant to be a collection of fairy tales well known within the world of RWBY. In the same vein, today we're going to be talking about the fairy tale version of the two brothers, and while the version Jinn gives us is the canon version, the fairy tale version we're discussing today can give us more insight into the backstory of the two brothers before Salem came into their lives, at least as far as the people of Remnant themselves believe. We're going to break it all down, but real quick, I want to remind you guys to subscribe. We're going to be covering RWBY quite a bit as each new volume comes out, and you're not going to want to miss it. In the world of RWBY, the term fairy tale is used as a sort of umbrella term that includes stories similar to the classic fairy tales we have in our world, such as Rapunzel or Snow White, as well as religious or mythological stories. Fairy tales are, by their nature, something we aren't really meant to believe, but rather to be entertained by and to learn from. But mythologies and religions provide an explanation for the physical state of the world, as well as what our purpose in it is, with a more absolute standard as opposed to a personalized one. Unlike many religions or mythologies, however, the story of the two brothers, both from within the show and the version we get in the book, do not focus on the idea of an afterlife or even on one's personal duty to worship or live in a certain way for a god. But rather, as explained in the show, the story of the two brothers focuses on how we were created not for any bigger purpose that we must fulfill, but just because they wish to create us and let us find our own destiny. It was not until other issues arose that life itself became a test for humans, but again, it was not a test of self or a test of faith, but a test for the species as a whole to come together and be deemed worthy of existence itself. In the fairy tale version presented in this book, the origin of the two brothers is described as them originally being a single being, also a dragon, who roamed the universe in search of others like himself. After some exploration, he decides that he is alone in the universe and instead should create someone to share the universe with, and in doing so tries to break off a part of himself to create the other, and thus splits himself into two beings, one of light and one of dark. This is a very common beginning for many religions and myths, both in reference to creating other mythical beings as well as being the motivation for creating man itself, someone alone wishing to have someone to share the world with. Humans tend to naturally think of the god of light in these types of scenarios as being the original, with the shadow being some evil little brother of sorts. But as the story progresses, both end up saying that they wish that they had never created the other. Since they were originally both the same being, their consciousness should have been shared up until the split. From both of their perspectives, they are continuing to exist with only the other part of themselves now being a separate entity. The two had gone on to create different things on Earth, with the god of light focusing on life and the god of darkness focusing on disaster, with the closest he gets to making life being the Grimm, who hunt the living. At some point, they agree to work together to create humans, which is meant to bring them together in a way, but further divides them as they can't decide on just how much help they deserve. The god of light wants them to flourish with his gifts, and the god of darkness wants to challenge them. He creates natural-seeming disasters, not because he likes to see them suffer, but because he likes to see them grow. This duality is also a constant theme in various religions, and in philosophical examinations are believed to speak to the nature of reality itself, that there is no good or bad, but rather that everything that happens is all a part of our progression. Some people make great things when they are handed the tools to do so, and others create great things in response to the troubles the universe throws at them, to rise above them or even create something better that the world needs as a whole. In the story presented to us in the show, Salem, with her curse of immortality, convinces humanity to join her in taking power from the gods, and the brothers end up wiping them out and creating a new race of humans. From here, they bring back Ozma with the ability to reincarnate and explain to him their plan, to let humans to continue to develop on their own, with them returning one day to judge if humanity is worthy of their existence. Just like with the previous humanity, good and evil both still exist as entities actively influencing their lives. The god of light left the 4 great tools for man to use, gifts that could make them great, represented by Ozma and his desire to bring them there. Then of course there is darkness, the natural evil of the world, which is represented by Salem, who can control the Grimm, a natural enemy to humanity, one that, while evil, has led to great many reactions from humanity, from battle to technology to philosophy. Humans of Remnant are interesting because they are in some way a reflection of the original god before he split himself into two. The wild animals of Remnant were created by the god of light, and the Grimm by the god of darkness, but humans were created by both, with the only other thing in the known universe being made up of both being the original dragon god. No mention of Salem, Ozma, the relics, or even the first humanity are mentioned in this storybook version of the two brothers, which raises the question of who is the one telling it. While Salem and Oz were united for some time, it was before Oz had been entirely honest about what the gods had asked of him. Somewhere between this and the modern era of Remnant, Salem and Ozma likely started telling the story to others, perhaps with the intent of covering up certain details, but focusing on the major themes, and then of course people changed it from generation to generation after each retelling. In the book, each chapter ends with notes from the character of Ozpin himself, addressing readers, who are supposed to be people from within the world of Remnant, and he talks about the nature of the story from the perspective that we often examine religion and mythology in the modern day, less about the physical events and more about what they mean to us as humans, in this case how humanity needs to come together to prove itself worthy. Even a world like ours, this is a common idea, where humans are in many ways destroying the planet that they call home in the pursuit of progress, something perfectly captured in RWBY by the Grimm, an outside force who would see humanity go extinct if they could, and the only hopes of stopping them seeming to be coming together, as any time that the characters are divided, we see that it only leads to more people dying. In a way, the judgment the brothers are giving these humans is a judgment on themselves. They were originally one being that encompassed both light and dark, and humans are now the only other beings that have that within themselves. While the story from Jinn ends with the gods leaving so that the humans can be tested, the fairy tale claims that they cannot actually leave the earth permanently as long as humans live on it, because they are weakened without the gifts that they gave to the humans, and that eventually becomes somewhat of an inversion of what religion in our world actually is, humans proving themselves to be good in order to have a place in God's kingdom. But here, as I said before, we have the inversion. Humans as a whole proving they are worthy enough to have the gods give up some semblance of their powers and their identities to live and walk among humanity. It promises not an afterlife or a vague future where we are gods, but rather that through unity we may have the power to do godlike things, not through magic itself, but through what we are inherently capable of if we put aside our differences first and decide to work towards a greater good. If you guys made it this far, I highly recommend buying the actual book, The Fairy Tales of Remnant. There are a lot of really cool fairy tales, and even more about the fairy tales that I've discussed that didn't make it into this video. We also have more RWBY content coming as the series progresses, so make sure you subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.